difference between poetry and rhetoric is being ready to kill yourself instead of your children. I am trapped on a desert of raw gunshot wounds and a dead child dragging his shattered black face off the edge of my sleep. Blood from his punctured cheeks and shoulders is the only liquid for miles, and my stomach churns at the imagined taste, while my mouth splits into dry lips without loyalty or reason, thirsting for the wetness of his blood as it sinks into the whiteness of the desert where I am lost without imagery or magic, trying to make power out of hatred and destruction, trying to heal my dying son with kisses. Only the sun will bleach his bones quicker.
Power by Audre Lorde. This poem is about white supremacy, the powerlessness of Black people, fear and hatred. She begins the poem by alluding to the difference between poetry and rhetoric. The main difference lies within the fact that in poetry you would rather kill yourself than your own children. Rhetoric, however, would do the exact opposite. Poetry stands on its own. It holds metaphorical power, which expresses emotions such as beauty, pain, fear, and anger. Poetry is a power which can hold all perpetrators accountable and serve justice. In a way, she explains her use of poetry to talk about the murder of the little boy. Moreover, how she uses poetry as a way to process the trauma and utilize it to make change. Rhetoric, on the other hand, is used by the enemies, police enforcement, lawyers, and judges. In other words, the American justice system is vastly based on the use of rhetoric. Unlike poetry, rhetoric does not stand on its own. It serves to persuade the listener by using foul methods of persuasion. One example is how society tries to portray Black people as the enemy and deliberately ignores and perpetuates their suffering. It is the rhetoric of racial hatred. In the next stanza, Audre Lorde captures the brutality and terror of Clifford Glover's murder. The author describes a nightmare-like state of death and violence in which she finds herself in a desert with Clifford's lifeless body. She is surrounded by his fresh gunshot wounds and streams of blood, providing the only liquid in the white desert. The whiteness of the desert alludes to the deeply embedded white supremacy in the American justice system. The white desert is blemished by the red blood of the assassinated boy. Quite literally, our justice system has the blood of Clifford Glover, among endless other Black children, on its hands. Lorde continues to speak about her dry mouth, starting to long for the boy's blood, which sinks through the sand around her. She started to crave his blood, meaning that she would not stop thinking about the innocent boy killed in a system that was never made for people like him. The heinous murder of the boy consumed everything inside her. She tried to use hatred and destruction and the pain she feels for the victim and turn it into power. Power that can be used to fight white supremacy, protect Black lives, and finally achieve racial justice.
The policeman who shot down a 10-year-old in Queens stood over the boy with his cop shoes in child's blood, and a voice said, "Die, you little motherfucker," and there are tapes to prove this. And at his trial, this policeman said, in his own defense, "I didn't notice the size or nothing else, only the color." And there are tapes to prove this, too.
In the next stanza, the author shines light onto the policeman's shameless hatred for Black people. In his defense, the NYPD officer states that he didn't notice the size nor nothing else, only the color. The murderer of Clifford Glover blatantly admits the racial motivation behind the killing of the innocent boy. He reduced the young boy merely to his skin color, and in a country which assigns little to absolutely no worth to dark skin complexion, the policeman viewed him as less than a human being. She further mentions how these statements were on court record. Therefore, everyone, ranging from the individuals involved to the people in court, knew that Clifford Glover's death was no inevitable accident or misunderstanding. Instead, the 10-year-old boy was a victim of racial discrimination and cold-blooded murder.
Today, that 37-year-old white man with 13 years of police forcing was set free by 11 white men who said they were satisfied justice had been done, and one black woman who said they convinced me, meaning they had dragged her 4-foot 10-inch black woman's frame over the hot coals of 4 centuries of white male approval until she let go of the first real power she ever had and lined her own womb with cement to make a graveyard for our children.
In the 4th stanza, Lorde describes how the murderer of the innocent boy was acquitted on all accounts, despite indisputable criminal evidence. The jury, which consisted of 11 white men and 1 black woman, believed that this verdict served justice. The poet, however, concludes that the black jurors' approval to assert Thomas Shea's innocence was a result of a decades-long power struggle between white and black people. Through acts of bullying, condescension, and the power of her white male counterparts, she was not convinced of Shea's innocence, but rather forced to comply. In other words, she was pressured to let go of the first real power she ever possessed. Metaphorically, she was forced to line her own womb with cement, meaning that she had to kill her own people and her own children in order to survive in a corrupt justice system.
I have not been able to touch the destruction within me, but unless I learn to use the difference between poetry and rhetoric, my power too will run, corrupt as poisonous mold, or lie limp and useless as an unconnected wire, and one day I will take my teenaged prick and connect it to the nearest socket, raping an 85-year-old white woman who is somebody's mother, and as I beat her senseless and set a torch to her bed, the Greek chorus will be singing in 3/4 time. Poor thing, she never hurt a soul, what beasts they are.
In the last stanza, the poet refers to how she can use poetry as an expression of power. Unlike rhetoric, power can be used to channel one's fear, rage, and frustration. She further explains how if power is not used efficiently, it turns either useless or unscrupulous. Finally, she alludes to society's hypocrisy as she sets up a hypothetical scenario in which she abused an old woman. Society would condemn this vile crime against a clearly helpless old person. However, society's support and sympathy only reach certain groups of helpless people, like the old white lady. At the same time, one of the largest helpless communities in the US, namely black people, fall in the shadows of society's interests.